Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. So one of the things that is a tremendous honor and privilege about the work I do is getting to have this deep window into other people's life experience that's very different from my own. And over time, with different people with different facets, I get this understanding of things or information about things that might not have ever crossed my path. And because I'm getting to look at people's soul and essence and soul contracts and soul intentions, there's this deep information that's available. And so I want to use this to talk a little bit about transgender people. And I want to be very careful in framing the conversation as someone who is not transgender and by no means has all the information or even expertise in navigating that path. And so what I'm going to offer in this podcast is some things that I've seen from the transgender clients that I've worked with that might be helpful or illuminating for someone who doesn't necessarily have a framework for understanding what might be going on a soul level. And if you're someone who isn't transgender but earnestly wants to understand more deeply and honor that experience, then this could be some helpful information for expanding your perspective. And I'm very aware that this is super limited to the people who've come through my door, virtually or in person, for whom I've had the opportunity to look at their souls. So it's by no means a comprehensive. I'm not going to say these however many different situations apply to everybody who's having that experience as a soul, but it's going to give you some things that might or might not fit. So if you're someone who is transgender and you're looking for a deeper spiritual understanding, what my guides have shown me about some other transgender people that I've had the honor of working with might be relevant to you. And if it doesn't fit, I totally trust you to know that. You would be the one who would have the best ability to say, yeah, doesn't fit for me. Interesting framework. Okay, great that they had their experience, not my experience, not particularly relevant. And that's totally cool. So I by no means want to say this is comprehensive or complete, but there seems to be, for some of the people I've worked with, a relief in seeing the alignment of the soul path for something that has a human path that often includes a lot of judgment and marginalization, and it pains me how much higher the suicide rates are of young people who are dealing with being transgender. And so what I've seen with some of the people I've been able to work with one-on-one is seeing the guides and their souls say, no, everything is right with you. This is appropriate, and here's why, can provide a relief in the really distorted, bizarre mirroring that can come from our mainstream culture. I find it utterly baffling that anyone would have any opinion whatsoever of someone's lived experience of what gender they feel they are. Like, surely they would know, I remember years ago listening to Mary of Peter, Paul, and Mary give an interview, and people were asking, well, which one are you romantic with, Peter or Paul? And she's like, neither. And they're like, no, really, which one? And she's like, you'd think I would know if I was sleeping with one of them. And it's kind of like that. Of course the person would know. And this isn't meant to exclude people who are non-gender binary or who are really that twin flame, who are both equally. And in addition, this isn't necessarily covering the ground of how people have their inner masculine and their inner feminine. So it's hard to use those terms because they have so much baggage. There's so many associations with them. But I would argue that the polarity of masculine and feminine dances inside of us, and having a collaborative relationship between your inner masculine and feminine, regardless of how you identify, is really helpful. So you could think of it as if you were looking at hunting and gathering, where the hunting is single focus and producing a result, and gathering is open and available, and those could be thought to correspond to the masculine and the feminine. And if you're locked into one way of being, you will either not be productive enough in the world, where you're not producing enough results, or what is much more common that I see, you're so locked into the value of productivity that you don't have being time. You're so much about doing that you don't do being and yin time and downtime. So that's a whole nother conversation, but I just want to kind of acknowledge, if you're somebody who is cisgender, which basically means, the physical anatomy of the body you're born into feels congruent with your sense of your gender. I'm probably explaining that imperfectly, but please forgive me. I just want to note here, I may not be super up to date on what the most appropriate aligned language is, and I know that that can be hurtful, and so I'll apologize in advance if I get it wrong. It's a moving target. Like, the most up-to-date way to talk about these things changes, and sometimes I can fall behind without realizing it. And sometimes the terms that are used by the most cutting-edge activists are not the terms that are used by the greater population that they're representing. So I'm just going to acknowledge that. If you're going to be deeply offended if I, misstep or use outdated language, then please turn this off now. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to hurt anyone. And I'll do the best I can. I've certainly studied the subject, but I'm by no means an expert, and I don't know that I'm totally up to date. And my goal is to talk about what I'm shown on the soul level. So backing up to before we come into the human experience, when we're, in our infinite form, connected to our higher self, my experience of talking to lots and lots of spirit guides is that may or may not be gendered. Sometimes there's a presence that feels more masculine. Sometimes there's a presence that feels more feminine. Once you get into the incarnation game, you may have more of an affinity and a way of running your energy that corresponds to what you incarnated in the most times. And yet, what I find is our souls in the series of incarnations often deeply want to explore diversity of experience. So it gets kind of boring if you keep incarnating and being the same thing over and over again. So if you're always in a particular job role, if you're always in a particular gender, if you're always in a particular geographic location, your soul may not be finding a growth edge. And I'm sure that there are souls who are like, yeah, cool, I just kind of want to keep doing what works for me. It's awesome. But I tend to have people walk through the door who have a desire to learn and grow and transform. And so unsurprisingly, their soul intention when I talk to their higher self and their team of guides is about diversity of experience and exploring a wide variety of things. And one thing that's interesting about the modern era is the level of safety of being in a female body is up from what it was historically. And I'm not saying we don't have a tremendously long way to go. I work as a specialty with women overcoming sexual trauma and releasing that and cleaning that up. So I know there's still a lot of that out there, but our level of ability to be safe in a female body in certain geographical locations and circumstances is higher than what our ancestors enjoyed. And so there may have been an affinity for incarnating as a woman, but the price of admission for how much danger you would be in throughout your life just felt too high. And yay, modern era, opportunity to explore something new without so much risk of violence. Still risk of violence, but not the level of risk of violence that our ancestors endured and put up with, and people in certain parts of the world still do. Or you're just interested in switching it up. You're like, wow, I've been a woman a lot of times. I think I'll be a man this lifetime, or vice versa. And one of the challenges that can happen is you're like, okay, cool, this will be awesome. And it does sound awesome on paper to try something really new and come in different than the gender that you've had all these lifetimes. But then you might get here and go, no, this is so weird. This feels awful. The hormones are all wrong. It's wonky inside of me. I don't like being filled with estrogen instead of testosterone. Or testosterone is hard. Where's the estrogen? You know, like just the hormonal imbalance, the way your body works can just feel so wrong. And it's that theoretically we're really flexible. Oh, sure, I'll try this sport. And then we try the sport and we're like, I hate this. This is horrible. Why did I think this was a good idea? And so I commend your soul's sense of adventure in trying on something unfamiliar. And I totally get if the result of the experiment is, no, I really want to move my body as much into alignment so that it is the gender at a hormonal level, at a physical level that matches the way that my essence feels appropriate being embodied. And so sometimes there's just a little bit of like, yeah, this will be great. I'll get some diversity of experience. I'll see the other side of things. And then it's really overwhelming and unpleasant and feels really, really wrong and super intolerable. One of the other messages that I've received from the guides is that at the point that you were incarnating, if you incarnated a while back, there was a belief that humans would be further along and more effective in the medical processes to let us undergo gender transformation, you know, that we would be better at that from a medical standpoint. So it would be a simple thing. You're like, oh, you know, I had this experience and now that's enough. I've had enough of being embodied in a body that doesn't match my essence. So, all right, time to deal with it. And the medical model is not as far along as it could be. And so there can be some just not what you were expecting when you plan this incarnation. Another reason or intention for coming in and essentially not your gender body is that men and women's energetic circuitry runs really differently. So men's energy tends to come up from the earth, and eventually, if you're moving it all the way up, it can make it up to the crown chakra. Women's energy tends to come down from source, so we're drawing our energy all the way down. This is, as Shan Rup, one of my Tantra teachers, taught me, and I found really useful, part of why men and women can have such a hard time with sex if they aren't involving alcohol or so much chemistry or just so much sexual need that they ignore other things. Because for a woman to be ready to have sex, she needs to make her way all the way down to the sacral chakra, which means the crown chakra feels aligned. The third eye sees this as the vision of the right thing. She's met in the throat chakra in communication. There's a heart chakra alignment. Third chakra, solar plexus, her boundaries are being respected. Her yeses and her nos are being heard and honored. And then she can drop down into the sacral chakra. Men's energy comes from earth up. So they resolve safety needs. Am I safe? And then, okay, sex could happen. I can rise into the second chakra. So that's one of both men and women lamenting, why does it have to be so complicated? Sex is so fun, and yet it seems so hard. And wanting to master a different chakra path or way of moving energy can be part of it, so that you have access to both. Because if you've incarnated as one gender a bunch of times and then you come in as the other and get to work with the circuitry that goes with that body, your soul can learn to run both pathways, which is kind of cool. It's pretty powerful to be able to move both directions with your intention, so there can be that upgrade. There are also different forms of manifestation. Women's manifestation is more magnetic. It's magnetizing in the thing you desire. Men's form of manifestation is more focused and gather all the energy and point it in the specific direction. And it's great to master both, but if you are in a female body, moving your energy in a female fashion, the manifestation of magnetizing the thing you want to you is going to come easier. And interestingly, that's the less taught form of manifestation compared to the gather and focus all your energy. So it's great to have mastery with both, but it's also useful to know this. So one of the things that you can work with if you find yourself in a body that's the wrong gender, or I'm not talking so much about people who are just non-binary, because there could be a lot of different ways to work with this. Ideally, you're mastering both pathways. You learn to move your energy kind of at will, whichever way, and you may have a little bit of an easier time because of the hormones and the anatomy of the physical body that affects the anatomy of the energetic body if you play with the ones that are the gender of the body or the sex of the body. Sorry, again, I know I'm messing up the terms here of which is specifically which, but hopefully that still makes sense. If you're working with the biological sex, you might get a little more of a boost, or it might be more fun to master the other one because the other comes easier. It just depends how much of a geek you want to be about manifestation and moving energy and chakras and all of that. Another thing that I think is really powerful is if you do have the awareness of saying, wow, I am in the wrong gender of body, I'm in the wrong sex of body, it should really look differently, then the invitation is to learn to move your energy in a way that's congruent with the truth of your spirit. So, when it comes to physical sex, you can be moving your energy in a way that you can penetrate if you're moving it in a masculine way, or be receptive to penetration. Just on energetics. Energetic sex is super cool, and it's non-anatomy based. And so when it comes to having sex, polarity is really important. So things move most dynamically when there's the active principle with the receptive principle, and you get this kind of dialectic opportunity for energy to jump across. And that's something to pay attention to. So even partners of the same gender often polarize this kind of energy. Even if they switch it up, it doesn't mean they're stuck in that all the time, but when it comes to sex, usually it kind of gets worked out of who's going to be more receiving and drawing in, and who's going to be more the active principle. And so clarity about how to move your energy body in a way that feels really yummy, that's congruent with your internal truth about whether you feel male or female, can be a powerful form of mastery that just helps you not be so limited by the considerable limitations on biology that we're still kind of working our way through. It's a bummer. It's a bummer that the humans are so weird and repressed and sex negative and narrow and rigid about these kind of things. There's so much opportunity across the spectrum for play and joy and expression that's missed out on. And I'm always just kind of bummed that I don't get to play with more humans that are healthy and open and curious about sexuality and willing to take each other's word for what flows for them and what works for them. So one other reason for a transgender path that I want to mention, or non-binary, or something that is marginalized in our society, is sometimes you were hurt in a past life by coming in a time when that wasn't safe. And your soul really feels strongly about being part of creating the space for people to not be harmed by this difference. And so sometimes it's an activist soul of like, all right, humanity's starting to wake up. I can ride the wave of actually making a meaningful difference by coming in, being this thing, and being an activist, using my voice, using my magic, and I can move the dial appreciably within my own lifetime. So we're seeing, even in a 5-year block of time, for sure we still have a long way to go, but we're seeing these things move. We're seeing how marginalized different identities are change over time. And I agree it's not fast enough, and it's absolutely nuts that we would even have to do this, so this would even be a conversation. But part of why your soul may have picked this is an activist nature. And one of the things that can happen with that is it seemed a grand soul passion when you first incarnated, but beating your head against the prejudice and the rigidness can become painful over time. So one of the things I always work with when I'm dealing with someone who's marginalized in any way, whether we're talking about sexual orientation or, being transgender or anything where they're being harmed by being marginalized, you want to build really good energetic shields. You want to really focus on being able to protect yourself and filter the super icky energy that will be thrown at you as a representation of someone else's bigotry and what's not right inside of them. And so there's a good book by Ted Andrews called Psychic Protection that's a fantastic manual for this. And being able to build really good shields so you clean out. You're making your own safe space inside your auric field that turns away, that deflects ugliness that comes at you energetically. And that's a powerful part. And also, just if you came in with a real activist heart and you're also sensitive and it's gotten painful, just adjusting that so you find a different way to engage, so you're not having one part of yourself hurt in order to implement the vision. And that's a really personal choice, but there's sort of this, we come in with these soul contracts and these soul plans and these ideas, and those are beautiful. I totally honor and support that. And they don't always stay the best manual for what we want to create. So we get to update and we get to rewrite them and we get to find ways to dance with them that are really aligned. So whatever your original soul plan is, you can also find what works for you given the life that you're living. So there may be other choices in a way that you adjust your activism that doesn't have you bumping into things if that's proved painful, and leave that work to people for whom it's invigorating. Because I'm so delighted to fund activists who find it really fun to, bump energy and be in their expression, and they're not being hurt or depleted by it. So I'm a huge fan of self-care, and then from there, being really strategic and thoughtful about the many, many, many different ways we can move the dial on the many things in the world that need to have the dial moved on them. So thank you so much for listening. Again, I apologize. I'm quite sure that I, used incorrect language to describe what I was talking about somewhere in there. And if you are someone who's passionate about the subject and can give me grace around that, it's deeply appreciated. And I hope that there's value for this in either finding some truth about what your soul is up to, finding some new avenues of exploration for how to move your energy body, your manifestation magic that is not tied to your biology, although it'll just take a little bit more focus if you want to move it in a way that doesn't naturally align with the biology that you happen to have, but so doable, so totally, totally doable, and not overly complicated if you get the right teachers. And for people who aren't walking that path, just seeing the encouraged nature of that. Like, I think on the part of the guides in the universe, there's so much excitement as people begin to be safe enough to come in and explore diversity. So when it comes to same-sex attraction, the guides are like, there's just something unique and magical and beautiful about a woman who's attracted to another woman, or a man dancing in his sexuality with another man. It's a different form of relationship. It's deep and rich and gives you so much more realm to explore in sexuality and attraction and depth and love and relationship. And so as the world moves to make the price not so miserably high, as in you'll get killed, and I'm not saying I'm okay with how much the price still is in terms of marginalization and how harmful that is, but there's a real beauty in it being safer to incarnate in a physical body, to have same-sex relationships, to be transgender and check out what that space is about. There are all these things that are opportunities that are deep, rich parts of the potential for the human experience that give our souls a richer opportunity that could never be arrived at if we just travel down the sort of mainstream paths. You miss so much amazing experience. And so if you're someone who isn't exploring something like this, it may help you turn your lens so you're seeing like, wow, what amazing brave souls. They're really experiencing something rich and beautiful and unique, and that not everybody knows the magic and the beauty. I'm imagining you could sit down with someone and get curious about what was really beautiful about the uniqueness of that experience, and there would be cool things that you never thought of in whatever gender and sexual identity you reside in. So seeing the beauty and the courage and the awesomeness of this variety of soul expression in human beings is a very good lens through which to see the world. So thank you so much for listening, and for whatever grace you've offered me in stumbling over this complicated topic that I know I'm not talking about personally. I really deeply thank you, because it's not my intent to get it wrong, and yet I don't talk about these things all that much other than one-on-one with people, because I'm not an expert, because I'm doing something different, and so the proper terminology doesn't roll trippingly off my tongue, and I apologize for my limitation in that regard. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.